Hi folks, one of the things I often get asked about is how I maintain orientation when flying in a line of sight configuration and using a quadcopter as I have here, where all the propellers are of the same color. And in this video I'm just going to try to attempt to kind of break down my thought process on it, at least my approach to maintaining orientation like this, and kind of what I do. I'm going to break this down into just 3 key points that I really think help to maintain orientation if you keep these in mind. So I'm going to start out with the flying style. And basically there's 2 flying styles, or flying types if you will, that you can be, at least that I'm flying in anyway. Okay, so we'll get it up here. And the 2 types are basically box flying, which right now I'm flying box. You know, I can move left or right, forward and back, and I'm basically maintaining the same orientation all the time. So this would be just an example of box flying. And so when you're box flying, it's pretty obvious to tell what the orientation is because it's never changing. Okay. Now the other type of flying, at least I do pretty much all the time, is forward flight. So in forward flight you can be flying different circuits, but you know, in general the front of the quadcopter is aimed downward. So again, it's pretty easy to tell orientation. Okay, now that I've talked about the 2 main flying styles, I want to talk about yaw. And yaw is probably one of the hardest things to master when it comes to maintaining orientation. And it's the thing that you really need to be the most mindful of. Because when you're doing the box flying, again, like I said, you're never using yaw and you're never changing orientation. When you get into the forward flight, like I'm doing here, you know, yaw is used, but you're usually generally very mindful of what you're doing, and the front of the quadcopter is pointed forward. And where you can really get into trouble is if you just do a flat spin like this. Like I was sort of able to maintain it there, but it can be very hard to tell what direction you're facing if you do a fast spin like that. I just had to pitch forward and kind of regain orientation, because I'll tell you right now, like, I don't really know which way it's going, so I'm going to do a flip to get out of that. So basically, now if I do a funnel, you know, I'm basically still in forward flight. It's those flat spins, which are basically just yaw, that are going to get you into trouble. So that's really what you have to be mindful of, is your yaw inputs. You know, I'm back into just basic general forward flight here. Then I'll stop and do some box flying. You know, I can go wherever I want. And as soon as I throw some yaw in, now I'm actually nose in, and everything's reversed, and that's where you tend to get into trouble. So you have to be really mindful of that yaw input. Alright, and the last thing I want to talk about is flips and rolls. Flips and rolls really never change your orientation as long as it's a continuous flip or roll. They really only change your orientation, and it changes 180 degrees if you do an off-axis flip or roll. See, here I've maintained nose-out orientation, and I can flip and roll all day. Your orientation never changes. It doesn't matter if I do a big loop like that, or if I do a tight flip. Now where I'll get into trouble is if I do an off-axis one like that. There, I came out of it nose in and didn't give it enough throttle. My battery pack's actually getting low, so I'm going to change that and just kind of commentate while I fly a little bit more here. Okay, so I'm back up in the air, and just going to do some general box flying here. You can see my orientation is never changing. Doing flips, I can flip all day long, roll all day long. As long as I complete those actions, my orientation stays the same. Okay, I do a little forward flight, and the front of the quad is always pointed down. Even though I'm using yaw, it's pretty easy to tell which direction. And I'm not even thinking about the props or what colors they are. And you know, for me at least, if I stop to think about that type of thing, that's where I get into trouble. So I just like to kind of have the natural feel of the flying, and you know, the thought process involved. Use that to maintain your orientation. So go around into some forward flying here, pretty much the nose of the quad is aimed down, come back in, and now I'm nose out and doing some box flying. And box flying doesn't have to be nose out, it's just the easiest. Now I'm doing some nose in. You know, I can flip and roll there. It's just definitely a little harder to control when you're nose in. Go back to nose out. And again, just to transition from the nose in to the nose out, all I used was yaw. And that's probably the biggest point to keep in mind is yaw. Just be mindful of it. See, even here, if I do like a tighter funnel, you know, I still consider that forward flight myself because, you know, the front of the quad is aimed downward. Let's see here, we'll get ourselves into trouble again and just do a big flat spin as fast as I can, and you know, there I completely lost orientation and was able to recover it with a quick flip. So let's do that again here. Oh yeah, I'm in trouble. And there it goes. It's those flat spins. So hopefully those points will help some of you folks that are having difficulty or questions about maintaining orientation. At least maybe help out a little bit.